They called it a fair tax reform. Farmers called it an attack on family land. Now Labour has quietly backed down. So what really changed, and who forced their hand? Welcome to Power and Policy UK, the channel where British politics, policy decisions, and real-world consequences come together. Here we cut through the headlines, strip away the spin, and explain what today's political choices really mean for you, your money, and the future of the UK. If you want clear, factual analysis without the noise, you're in the right place. The row over inheritance tax and farmers has taken a fresh turn, and it's one that few people expected to see so soon. After weeks of mounting pressure, angry reactions from rural communities, and warnings from within its own ranks, Labour has quietly softened its stance on what critics branded a raid on family farms. The change doesn't scrap the policy outright, but it does mark a clear retreat from the hardest edges of a plan that had become politically toxic. For many farmers, the original proposal landed like a thunderclap. Inheritance tax has always been a sensitive issue in rural Britain, where land values can be extremely high, but cash flow often isn't. A family farm might be worth millions on paper, yet generate modest annual income. That disconnect is at the heart of why inheritance tax has long been treated differently for agricultural property, with reliefs designed to stop farms being broken up or sold off just to pay the tax bill when a generation passes on. Labour's initial messaging suggested those protections were ripe for reform. The argument was simple, and to some supporters, persuasive. Generous reliefs had allowed wealthy landowners to shelter large estates from inheritance tax, even when those estates were no longer truly working farms. In a country struggling with stretched public services and rising inequality, Labour said it was only fair that everyone paid their share. But in practice, that argument quickly collided with the lived reality of farming life. As details emerged, farming groups warned that tightening agricultural property relief could hit genuine working farms far harder than Labour anticipated. They said the policy risked punishing families who had farmed the same land for generations, not tax-avoiding millionaires. Protests followed, with tractors lining roads and placards accusing Labour of not understanding rural Britain. Conservative politicians seized the moment, framing the proposal as proof that Labour was hostile to farmers and disconnected from the countryside. What made the situation more uncomfortable for Labour was that the criticism wasn't just coming from opponents. Some Labour MPs in rural and semi-rural seats began voicing concerns privately and, in some cases, publicly. They warned that even voters who were open to Labour's wider economic message were alarmed by the prospect of losing family farms. In marginal constituencies, the policy threatened to undo months of careful campaigning. Against that backdrop, Labour's decision to water down the proposal starts to make political sense. Rather than pressing ahead with a blanket tightening of inheritance tax relief, the revised approach focuses more narrowly on the very largest estates and on situations where land is no longer actively farmed. The emphasis has shifted from raising revenue at all costs to protecting what Labour now describes as genuine family farms. This softening is being presented not as a U-turn, but as a clarification. Labour figures argue that their intention was never to force farmers to sell land or break up viable businesses. They say the policy was aimed at closing loopholes and ensuring reliefs are targeted properly, not removed wholesale. By refining the language and stressing safeguards, Labour hopes to reassure nervous rural voters while still maintaining its broader commitment to tax fairness. Even so, the episode has left scars. For farmers who felt singled out, trust has been shaken. Many say the damage was done the moment the policy was floated without sufficient consultation. In agriculture, where planning often stretches decades into the future, uncertainty is deeply unsettling. The idea that inheritance tax rules could change dramatically overnight has reinforced fears that farming is misunderstood by policymakers. Politically, this climb down highlights a familiar challenge for labor. The party wants to present itself as tough on tax avoidance and unafraid to challenge vested interests, yet it also needs to win support beyond cities and large towns. Rural Britain may not deliver huge numbers of seats, but it plays an outsized role in shaping national narratives about fairness, tradition, and food security. Policies that appear to threaten those values can quickly become liabilities. There's also a broader question about how inheritance tax should work in a modern economy. Critics of agricultural relief argue that land has become a financial asset as much as a means of production, and that unlimited relief encourages wealthy investors to buy farmland purely for tax reasons. Farmers counter that without strong protections, family agriculture becomes unsustainable, accelerating the decline of rural communities and pushing land into the hands of large corporations. Labor's revised position tries to walk that tightrope by signaling that reliefs will remain for active farming businesses while coming under greater scrutiny for passive landowners. The party hopes to address both concerns. Whether that balance holds up under closer examination remains to be seen. Tax policy is complex, and even small changes can have unintended consequences once they meet the real world. For now, the political takeaway is clear. Labor has listened, at least to some extent, to the backlash. The watering down of the inheritance tax plan is an acknowledgement that the original approach risked alienating a group of voters the party cannot afford to lose entirely. It also serves as a reminder that policies which look neat on paper can unravel quickly when they collide with public opinion. As the debate continues, farmers will be watching closely, not just the fine print of any revised proposals, but the tone and attitude that come with them. They want reassurance that their way of life is understood and valued, not treated as a convenient revenue source. Labor, meanwhile, faces the task of rebuilding confidence while sticking to its message on fairness and responsibility. This episode may end up being remembered less for the policy itself and more for what it reveals about the political landscape. It shows how sensitive inheritance tax remains, how powerful rural voices can be when mobilized, and how quickly a hated proposal can force a rethink. In watering down its inheritance tax raid on farmers, labor has avoided a full-blown revolt, but it has also learned a costly lesson about the limits of political appetite for change when livelihoods and traditions are at stake. That's the real story behind today's political move, not just who won the argument, but who feels the impact. At Power and Policy UK, we'll keep tracking every major decision as it unfolds, holding power to account and breaking down what it truly means beyond the slogans. If you found this breakdown useful, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because policy doesn't stop, and neither do we.